Welcome to the AirCon Vault, recordings of the live streams from Airwiggle's audio conference. These are made free thanks to our sponsors, A Sound Effect, Game Audio Learning, Kilohertz, Audio Kinetic, Sound Cuts, Tsugi, Boom Library, Sound Warriors, and Airwiggles, the online home for audio people.
Welcome to the Field and Foley live panel. My name is Ben, and I have three wonderful guests here that, for the first time in this podcast, are going to introduce themselves. So we're going to start with the wonderful Joanna Fang.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna. I am the Senior Foley Artist for Sony PlayStation Creative Arts Studio Sound. Yes, it's a really nice long name for a department, but I've been working here at PlayStation for roughly 3 years, and I've been shooting Foley for a while now. Actually, I was like trying to do the math in my head, but yeah, roughly like a decade now. So just happy to be here and like so excited to chat with Zoe and Bastian. I mean, we're like everyone here has such fascinating thoughts about Foley, and it's like super cool to put us all in one room. So thank you so much, Ben and Airwiggles, for having us.
Of course. And let's do Bastian next because he's next on my list here of people.
All right, Bastian Gerner, my name. I'm a Foley artist, sound designer, and re-recording mixer, working both in the video games and films industry. I started out as a musician, then worked in the films for 10 years, and then I worked at Ubisoft for 5 years as a senior Foley artist as well. And now I'm freelance again in my own studio and doing both, and also enjoying working on movies again.
Awesome. And now you, Zoe.
Hello, I'm Zoe Freed, Foley artist and Foley team leader for Sound Warriors at Molyneux. So we do everything from Foley to sound design and field recording and everything in between. I've been a Foley artist for 10 years now as well, and also do my own bit of field recording and sound designing as well.
Awesome. All the good stuff. All the good stuff. Cool. So then I'm going to start with asking you about how you got inspired to become a Foley artist, all of you, because, I mean, sound is a niche element, and then Foley is the niche of a niche. It's a very specific kind of thing. As you can see from the backgrounds, you amass a lot of stuff to make the job right. And so, yeah, just maybe quickly go the round. We start with Joanna again. What inspired you to become a Foley artist? Maybe did you have some influences in the industry, some people that you saw and you thought like maybe that's an amazing job to have? Or yeah, what was your way into it?
It's pretty fascinating because I think the biggest moment for me really in terms of my development into a Foley artist was I went to music school. I burned out significantly, and when I tried to understand what it was I loved about music and about cinema as a kid, I realized that there had to be some sort of shared DNA between performing music and like operating a camera. And so when I went to NYU Film after burning out in music school, originally I wanted to go study cinematography. And this awesome guy, David Miller, who is no longer with us, he was a sound designer, and he found out that I could sight read music. So that's the ability to just look at sheet music and sing or play your instrument in pitch, in time with what you see. And you usually have to be able to kind of figure it out as you go. And so he threw me on a Foley stage, and I told him, there's no way I'm going to be good at Foley. It's too rhythmic. It's too sync. And he was like, that's exactly the type of critical thinking that might make you good for it. Because most people see it and they think it's super easy, right? But the truth is, as Bastian and Zoe know, this is like as we all know, it's like super hard skill set to develop. And so yeah, that's kind of how I fell into it. And then luckily after I graduated, I started apprenticing for Leslie Bloom at Alchemy Post Sound, which was one of New York's bigger Foley stages. And yeah, I just grinded it out and worked as an assistant, an apprentice, and then made my way up the chain there. And yeah, and then I'm here. That's my life story, I guess.
That is awesome. Okay, going to you, Bastian. How did you first start with the Foley stuff?
Kind of similar. After being in the music game for many years, trying to survive as a rapper, I then decided to go into films. I wanted to study at the university, but they wouldn't accept me. And then I found an apprenticeship in Berlin with Basis Berlin. It's a post-production sound facility, and could spend 3 years there. And that's where I learned all about sound editing for movies. And from there, I got another position as an intermediate sound designer in an also Berlin-based new company. And then I worked my way up there from a sound effects editor, dialogue editor, basically catering for TV series, then working on movies, also as a sound effects editor, from time to time stepping in as a re-recording mixer when no one wanted to do the job. I took the blame and the credit. And then there was a new studio being built, and my manager back then said if I would be interested in being a Foley artist. And from that point in time until the studio was finished was like 2 years. And in that time, I could find a mentor and I could try things. And then I got kind of the feedback that it would be worth it for me to do this. And I also enjoyed myself, because actually that was the only thing I didn't do back then. I recorded Foley, I edited Foley, but I never performed the sounds myself on the stage. And then the moment when I did this the first time, it felt really natural to me. And then there was also a point in time in my career when I thought about whether to become a Foley artist or a re-recording mixer. And I decided also logically that it is better for me to become a Foley artist, because that's more niche, and there's so many re-recording mixers, and also the creativity behind it, and that you're not sitting down all day was something that motivated me to do this. And now I can live this creativity to the fullest, also recording myself, having this engineering part. Of course, I enjoy working with a mixer, but that's just how I operate right now. And that's my story.
Awesome. Also music. So we'll see if it's 3 out of 3. Zoe, how about you?
I'm sorry to disappoint. No music from my background.
That's good.
I found out about Foley when I was 15, and was like, holy shit, can't believe that this is a thing. And knew that it was really difficult to get into, so stuck with my first love, which is theatre. So I went to RADA to study technical theatre and sound design, so all the backstage stuff. And then at the end of my uni degree, I was like, hang on, I'm doing sound. I need to explore this Foley thing again. I really need to know what this is and if I can do it. And then just chucked myself into work experience whilst working at a pub, worked at as many studios as I could, shadowing as many people as I could, and eventually got a chance at Shepperton Pinewood with Glenn Gathard and the team. And they hired me as a runner, and I became Pete Burgess's assistant, trained me up. And haven't stopped since then. Loved it. I can't believe that I get paid to jump in the mud and play with swords and weapons and make really cool sounds all day. And so we left Pinewood 4 years ago now, built a new three new studios at Molinare, and have got a team of more than 50 of us, 4 Foley artists who we've trained up, one being my Foley partner, Rebecca. And we're all just, it's completely biased, obviously, but the best job ever.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And maybe we connect already to projects you worked on, because we found out over the course of communicating that you worked on projects together as well, that connects you all 3, which is awesome. Then maybe we can start with something that's really interesting to me, because you both mentioned that you worked with Joanna on the FKA Twig Paris Fashion show. So what did you do for Foley for that? And of course, I want to hear both of you. Just maybe Zoe start and then give it over to Joanna.
I'll actually let Joanna start, because it was her job.
Yeah. So when I was working in New York, I started doing productions. When I was trying to survive an internship and apprenticeship with Foley, I would do production sound for fashion film companies. And so, I'd wear all black and be super professional and put mics on people. And through all of that, I became really close friends with a lot of cinematographers who work in that industry, one of whom is friends with FKA Twigs and her partner. And so randomly one day, I got a message on Instagram from some random person from a management company being like, "Oh, I represent this musical artist and she wants to talk to you about Foley." And I was just like, "Get out of here. I feel like this is a hoax." So I said, like, "Who are you?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm friends with Jason, your buddy from your fashion film days." I was like, "Oh my gosh, get out of here." So after a bunch of weird emails and texts and everything, I was on the phone with Twigs, and it was wild because we started talking about Foley, and she was just like, "We're doing this thing, we're doing this cool fashion show, and I want to perform with my dancers Foley on stage on the runway." And I was just like super blown away. And so as we were chatting about dirt and different things, and I was like having to like kind of translate my American English concepts when it comes to like stone and brick and you know, rubbish and all that stuff, I realized I was like, I'm as much as I'm able to talk concepts, they need somebody to be there and tangible and in person and like really figure it out with them. And so we got in touch with her manager, and I was just like, "You guys have to bring on the team from Molinaire. You just have to." You know, Zoe and Rebecca are like incredible dynamic duo. I've had the chance to like listen to a lot of Foley here at PlayStation that they've done for us over the years, and they've also helped us out on God of War Ragnarok. So I was like, they're the perfect people for this job. And so we got this big group meeting. We talked to their musical director, and then pass it off to Zoe.
Awesome.
So it was pretty scary at the time, mainly because at one point they wanted us as Foley artists on the runway with them doing the Foley. And I was like, I'm going to really steer you away from this. You have got fantastic models in beautiful outfits. You don't want us like little mud gremlins in the background. So there was a lot of toing and froing, but then we got to the rehearsals and they'd built these amazing pits for us to use and show them sort of how Foley works and what we can actually do. There was a lot of like trying to explain what we do in a live setting as well, which is then quite difficult because they're going, "Oh, we want it to sound like this." And I'm like, "That's great. You're barefoot in the sand in this huge event hall. It's not quite going to work the way that you want it to. We can show you what it should be like and then maybe pre-record the Foley for you and you play that in, because it's all to music. It'll actually work really well together and nobody's going to be late or out of sync." So that was what we ended up with in the end, because at the time it was like, you know, putting microphones in and then dancers moving microphones and then not being able to hear themselves and knowing if they're in time to stuff. And yeah, it was quite complex, but in the end they did the Foley, not us, thank God, on live. And we pre-recorded it for them and got them to play it in.
That's amazing. That sounds like a fun gig and something that I didn't even know exists, like Foley for a fashion show. It's awesome. Yeah, so you were teaching them Foley.
Yes. Yeah.
That is great. And that's a good segue to go to the Foley teacher, Bastian, because we also found out that you worked on Avatar together with Zoe. Maybe you can talk a bit about what you both did. Maybe start you, Bastian, because I think you were in different departments, right?
Yeah, I was in-house as a Foley artist for Ubisoft, working on a project as a co-development studio. So we were not the lead on this. And I spent a long time recording assets for that game. I also did the first initial pass for the footsteps that were in the game for our development process, which was also a fun story because when I started there, they had no studio at all. There was just an office, and I was supposed to record Foley in there. So I brought my gear that is also here in this studio and tried to record sounds with my little modular surface. And then I had the coffee machine and the street and everything. And I was supposed to do 16 different types of forest footsteps, floor types. And I was going around the streets of Düsseldorf, collecting all the leaves and stuff that I could find, and then record it in there, and then spending time in an open office denoising that, finding out that this is not usable at all. And then there was just one option in Düsseldorf as Foley Stage that just had closed at that point in time. And I knew the guy with the keys to the studio, and we made it kind of work to go in there, get the electricity from the office above. And then I brought also my gear in, and then I took our lead audio designer, Tino Schleinitz, and we recorded without any reference 3 days, the whole thing. And then I spent another month editing that, and then it went in the game. That was my first task at Ubisoft. And yeah, then I was also a bit limited in terms of facility, because the studio we planned didn't come really. So I was with that interim solution I built up, which was just a small vocal booth basically with all my stuff in there. And luckily it was in a huge room, so I had enough space to store props, but the actual recording space was very limited. And in there I basically produced then all the sounds. And the best or the most satisfying thing to me was recording and designing the sounds for the harvesting system of that game. And I also closely worked together with an audio designer on it, and then we got all the feedback loops with the lead studio, and that was a really enjoyable process for me. But I also had to record physics objects and other stuff, just small for the small animations, yeah, which was also a great ride. So I learned so much about game audio in those 5 years, and it's also research and development also in terms of audio, much more than working in films. And I'm really glad that that I could do this, and I'm very curious to hear Zoe what she did on it.
So we did the cinematics on it. So we were lucky enough, so we did the Foley and sound design and full mixing for all of the cinematics. So got to work all really closely together, which was amazing. So we would get sort of small samples of things that we would try and match, so that obviously it's not like gameplay into cinematics. Oh, okay, it's actually completely different surfaces, or the footsteps sound completely different and stuff like that. And take it from, yeah, in-game assets into cinematics, mixed in with sound design from the team. Yeah, we had an amazing time making all of the costumes and running around ships and stuff. And in the forest, we're very lucky in our location where we are in our Foley studios, because we're in the middle of nowhere. So we have got fields and forests all around us, so we just go out every day collecting fresh things so that it all sounded really like crisp and fresh. Bring it
That's
all to
awesome.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
how was the process of exporting for the cinematics?
I've got no idea on that one. That would be the sound designers and stuff. I would just go, we'd record the Foley. It then goes to our Foley editorial team, who'd edit it all beautifully. And it'll then would get also our sound design team to send us their stuff at the same time, so we could hear sort of, oh, okay, there is a massive helicopter right now, we don't need to hear that guy, the same way that we do in films. And then we'd pull it all together at the end, and it'll go into the mix theatre, and they'd mix it all together into, I guess, the specific stems and what has been requested, to then send straight off to Ubisoft.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Yeah, the what you were requested. So was this a big list of characters and areas within the cinematic, or how was this structured so that you could know what to record and in what order?
It got delivered in batches, which is like usual for any sort of gameplay stuff. And it would be for us, just whenever a batch arrived, we'd start working on it.
But I mean, in the scenes themselves, were there like areas, because maybe the player can even move within the cinematic, so you have to pinpoint the sounds to certain game objects, and how was that communicated with you?
Gotcha. We got a spreadsheet as to anything that needed to be individual, or anything that could be recorded like we would do in a film, because they wanted that full sort of filmic experience but still have the control. So it's like, okay, that thing needs to be on its own, leave that one.
Yeah, I can imagine it was a lot of work then for the rest of the team exporting all that, because I
Yeah.
did that for Assassin's Creed Nexus VR. And sometimes it took me way longer to export and name everything correctly than actually record the sounds.
Because we've probably done about 20 games as a group of us. Our editors have got they've set up their own MIDI keyboards with shortcuts. So they are like bam, 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 bam in terms of renaming and exporting so that it's all done like as quickly and efficiently as possible, especially when you're
Amazing. That's research and development spot on, right?
yeah.
Yeah, spreadsheets rule the world everywhere. Just a quick question or a quick info for the viewers. You can ask your questions already in the chat. They will be compiled and we will go through them after a couple of questions that I have still. Yeah, going back to Joanna, another project I'd like to talk about is something very special because I think that's a movie that doesn't come like every year. It is called Hundreds of Beavers. If you haven't seen it yet, I urge you to at least check out the trailer and then you will want to see it. So, Joanna, maybe you can tell me a bit more about working on that movie because it's very special. Maybe shortly explain what it's about. And then, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, Hundreds of Beavers. What an interesting film. You know, it's like on Twitter, I was like, we have like all this amazing stuff, and it's like Hundreds of Beavers has been dominated my mind recently. So basically, what it is that it's an independent film directed by Mike Cheslick. In the past, I've worked with Mike for years, and he has this amazing style of animation and live action. So he likes to do. It's almost like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? You have like live action characters, you have animated characters, you have people in like fursuits. But basically, Hundreds of Beavers is a nearly dialogue-free feature-length film that was shot on like a micro budget, and it's like evokes Looney Tunes. It evokes all these like classic like vaudevillian cinema, and there's tons of sight gags and ridiculousness. But in the film, it's about a trapper who basically needs to kill and harvest hundreds of beavers in order to get all the things he dreams of. And so it was extremely awesome experience because as Bastian said, you know, when you work in video games, you get so used to this grind where you're looking at Google Sheets more than you look at Pro Tools sometimes. Like you spend more time exporting assets and like making sure everything's neat and tidy than like performing. Whereas I come from the world of cinema, and so being able to go back and just do a linear piece like that was like a huge joy. But yeah, because all of the sounds, because there's no dialogue for storytelling, we had to heavily rely on sound design and Foley to do all of the jokes, right? So setting things up to pay things off. If we see that, you know, the main character Gene Kayak is like setting up a huge ridiculous Acme style slingshot, you know, then we need to like be fully aware of what the punchline is and what the joke is. So that way, when we do the Foley for it, you could really feel us setting up your expectations. And that way, when it fails and he puts a carrot through his face, and there's like ridiculous gore, then it pays off, right? And for me, that's like the height of great Foley, is like having that awareness of, you know, where are we in the cinematic? Where are we in the story? Where are we in the game world? Where are we in the film? And being one of the very few people in post-production who gets to see the bigger picture, right? And it's especially obvious for comedies, especially ones that have no dialogue. Yeah. Great time. Loved working on that movie.
That's amazing. Maybe connecting to that, do you have any interesting or funny props you used for the Foley in that film?
Yeah, so we don't have snow here. Like that's the wild thing. The whole thing was shot in like Minnesota in the freezing cold. That's right on like and like all over, and we don't have snow. And the movie has all these different types of snow. So we like begged the restaurant that's right next door to us at PlayStation. They have this awesome ice machine that produces like perfect little pebbles. I used every cheat that I know for snow, and I researched some new ones. I talked to Gary Hecker over at Sony Pictures about what's his favorite sound for snow, because I think everyone has a different idea what snow sounds like in their heads based on where they're from, right?
Yeah.
Like, having come through New York, I know what like snow mixed with ash sounds like, because that happens a lot, you know, or frozen trash. So learning all those different ways to do snow and ice and lakes, we ended up using a giant hunk of marble with charcoal on it in order to replicate the squealing sounds you get when you're on top of like a frozen over lake. right? So
Nice.
it was a lot of fun. And something I really appreciate about Zoe and Bastian is that both of you are all really generous with your information about how you like to do things, because I think everyone does things differently, right? And so when we're stuck in situations where we're not just creating one snow surface, where we have to create 3 or 4 for the sake of the story or for the sake of variety and gameplay, that's when you really need to trust and learn from one another, because that's going to give you all the perspective you need as an artist to be authentic to what the story's demanding you to do, right? So I loved working on it, and that for me, that was the hardest thing, just using sand for snow. You know what I mean? Like that's like a little hecker thing. It was like, he taught me like, step on the starch and then kick some kitty litter with your other foot, and have like some like what do you call it, like a pom pom sitting next to it, so you get the spray and the sprinkle. And I was just like learning those little tips from him, and then trying to make it work when it was appropriate was probably my favorite experience on that film.
That's awesome. I just saw the term snowly in the chat, which I really like. I think we should take that as an official term now. Yeah, going to you, Bastian. Any recent props you used that were like funny or like strange or that you really like?
Talking about snow, I have this mat that you can lay out for barbecues or like just for picnics, basically, which has a little insulation. I can bring it. 1 second.
Awesome. Live demonstration. Very cool. Now we can look at all the props he has in the background. Look at that. Amazing.
So
Nice.
and I just found that, and just using it, I thought, oh, this is a great sound for snow. So I didn't use it maybe once, but this is something I can just mention. In general, this question oftentimes is not a question I like to answer, because everything is kind of individual, and like just a little fork or a tablespoon and a cup, and it has to be right. And this is all exciting. And the weirdest thing I ever did maybe was having we did some sci-fi sounds, and I used those metal plates that you can make thunder with. And then I used another tool. Now I'm missing the English word. I can maybe show it to you as well if you give me 1 second.
Of course. All good. What's that?
This one.
Oh, yes. Classic.
And it makes if you like spin it really hard, it makes a real tone and a modulating tone. And then this I moved around on the metal plate, and then I bended the metal plate together with that, so it modulated from 2 sides, and that gave really great sounds. But this is like, okay, all I have.
No, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, as you said, it's oftentimes it's like you have this cool thing for the one project, for the next project you have something else. So I'm just asking, like, in general, for something you right now remember, but of course it's like over the years you amass so many things and you change things, so that's totally fine. And maybe Zoe, do you have anything in mind or anything to show? I mean, you have a whole thing in the background as well, but you can also just talk about it. It's fine.
Well, just seeing as we're talking about snow, I've just finished, I think, be coming out this Christmas, a new Netflix animation. And to like help progress the story, we changed the sound of the snow as the story progressed. So like for different parts of where they were and what the characters were feeling, is it supposed to be, because it's all set in the same location really, so is it supposed to be like crunchy and hard and you're supposed to really feel that cold, or is it like soft and playful and throwing and like all of that? So I think we had probably 5 different types of snow just set out around the theatre. You had to proper air it for weeks afterwards. But like just going to that level of detail, and something that probably only really us know and think about, is those tiny things like, okay, this character is feeling a little bit scared, so I am going to put that little squeak of snow there, or that little crack, and no one else will hear that or even think twice about it. But that's part of our jobs, and thinking about those minute details that help tell the story and bring it all along, like Joanna was saying, is yeah.
I totally agree with that. And I think we oftentimes think that, yeah, maybe people won't notice it, and maybe they won't notice it consciously, but I think on a subconscious level, it still works, because I have the feeling now that I'm looking at media, movies, and games more from a sound perspective over the years while I've been working on sound. I've noticed that when I had a movie or game that didn't touch me that much, most of the time there was a problem either in the writing or in the sound. Like if the sound didn't match the emotions, then instantly your mind goes, nah, that's not real, or that doesn't fit, or there's like you won't get sad if everything is comical in the background. It doesn't work. So I think especially these details are very, very important. And yeah, just to round the root off, my current favorite Foley tool is the Foley sword. Which a little funny story about that. When I started for a game with swords, I bought like a real sword, like a medieval thing, not that expensive. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna buy a real sword and make some real sword sounds. And then I got it and I found out it doesn't make sound. It's like not the sound I'm looking for. I need that like old school shing when you pick up the sword. And then I learned about Foley swords, which actually is not a sword at all, but it's a bent piece of metal and it swings a lot, so it sounds a lot like a real sword. And yeah, that's currently my favorite thing to play around with. And I got two made from a friend of mine who is like a hobbyist blacksmith. So they both sound differently. One is a bit darker, one is a bit lighter, and you can make two characters fight each other and stuff like that. So, yeah, and exactly there as well, right? I'm choosing the right sword and the right frequencies for the character or for the emotion of the scene. And it's very important to keep those details in mind. Yeah, then maybe going next to like a specific project, do you have any favorite project you've worked on so far? Anything where you said like this was like the most special? I think, Joanna, for you maybe in the recent times probably the Beavers movie, because it was so reliant on sound. But if you have something else, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, that sword is awesome. We have a pair of those in our Japan Foley stage, and like I emailed them the other day and I was like, hey, can you guys help us out with some of these sword sounds? I know you got this like really cool setup, but yeah, those swords they sound so good, especially with the bend on it.
Yeah.
In terms of projects that are like near and dear, yeah, Hundreds of Beavers is definitely pretty up there, because it's the culmination of like a collaboration with a director that's lasted pretty much my entire career. Like Mike went to NYU Film School with me, and so he was working on this like live action animation concepts, and having me and Bob Barreto, the supervising sound editor, basically Foley or sound design every project he's ever worked on. And so rarely do you get a chance to interact with a creator like that and follow through on a franchise. The other project that's near and dear to me, which is almost the exact opposite, is Marvel Spider-Man 2 that we just released with Insomniac earlier, or last year actually, for slightly different reasons. In that project, I was I was brought on right when we went into like full gas ahead development. And so I have this massive brand new Foley stage filled with props from the previous game, and we have the Foley team, the sound designers who Foleyed their cinematics, they're all here in San Diego. So they basically were able to teach me all of the cheats and all of the concepts that they brought to the table in the first two games. And me and Blake Collins, my Foley mixer, were able to take that and then iterate on it. So Hundreds of Beavers on one hand is like part of a larger body of work that we've been culminating, a sound we've been chasing for a really long time. Whereas Spider-Man 2 was like 2 very extensive years of adapting what everyone else did before me and being flexible, while still at the same time trying to up the game and trying to find ways that we can make things better or more optimized Foley wise. So yeah, for me, that title is near and dear. Like every cinematic, every IGC, every element of gameplay has some form of Foley that was recorded for it. Whether or not you hear that in the final mix is a different story, because, you know, obviously Foley we're like the viola players in the orchestra. We're specialists. You know, sometimes we're playing our solos. Sometimes we're just supporting the narrative and supporting the overall feel of the title. But that game, I've never had a chance to fully immerse myself like that. And having just moved from New York to San Diego for this job, it felt like my love letter to New York. So I was very, very blessed to have worked on that project.
That's awesome. Yeah, maybe Bastian, you can go next. Any cool project you're very proud of? Anything where it's like this was amazing to work
First, I
on.
want to say that I feel so lucky to be part of this community, because Joanna and Zoe, like the projects you work on, I mean, that's like really outstanding and the top end of what you can do. And I'm so thankful, you know, to be in that chat with you, and also that you share your knowledge, and that we as a community do this, and that we are accessible. And this is just so great, you know. It's amazing. And imagine you are a musician and you can talk to, I don't know, you name it, yeah, to Madonna or whatever. It's unbelievable, huh, what we do here. And so yeah, saying that, of course, I enjoyed my time at Ubisoft working on Avatar and on Assassin's Creed. That was always my goal, to work on international titles, and I could achieve this. Lately, I was working on a movie that I did the full recording and performing, and also editing. It was the first project here in my new studio, and it was also a feature film with a proper budget. So that was also a very new experience to me, doing that as a freelancer. Also for my level of projects, you know, quite high up there in terms of budget as well. So I enjoyed myself working through that movie. It was not really special in terms of 5 types of snow. It was just a drama with 2 people on the road exploring, mourning of loved ones, and also suicide, stuff like that. So, but it was really a joy for me to get this thing done, and I'm proud that I did it, and also my clients are happy, and this was a very good start for me.
Yeah, I really like those projects, especially if they're not, I mean, especially if they're more indie or more small, then sometimes you even have more time or more care for those like really emotional scenes. And that's what I really love. Saying that, of course, Spider-Man 2, I really enjoyed the sound in there as well, just like the first one, and of course of God of War as well. But most of the time, I feel like especially more those indie or those smaller projects is where really the love is shining through, and where people are also like encouraged to experiment more with stuff. And yeah, it's really cool to hear. Yeah, Zoe, maybe you have also something, could be big, could be small. Of course, I've been a big fan of The Witcher. My wife and I have been watching that for a while, and I just found out like right before this panel, like a few days ago, that you actually did the Foley on that. So good work on that. It felt so vicious and so cool in every scene. So good job. Yeah, so go ahead. Anything else?
Oh, hang on.
Oh, yes.
I'll do a little show and tell here.
Yes.
Sorry, we've got equipment all over the floor because we're getting ready for a field recording trip.
That's fine.
But there you go, Witcher sword.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, loved working on The Witcher. So much fun creating those like insane creatures who half the time when you get the footage, it's just a man in a blue suit with like pool noodles going about. You're going, okay, what are we trying to create here? Oh, it's a giant tree. Okay, cool, let's go. So yeah, that's always lots of fun, creating like things from scratch, things that don't exist in our real world, which is why I think the crossover between film and game is also really fun, because more often than not, films are, you know, typically based in the real world, and games can be in both. But like making huge swamp monsters, or even for like High on Life, the Squanch game.
Yeah.
I got to spend 3 days making slime.
That's awesome.
Like there with plungers, like making different squelching sounds and stuff. That was great. I really enjoyed recently like Civil War, the new Alex Garland film. So I've loved working on his projects and feel so honored to be able to do it. And because his classic storytelling and like the way he uses sound in his films is amazing. So to create all those tiny details and then also still hear them when you go to the cinema, even like down to the gun rattles and stuff like that, when it all goes quiet and all you can hear is the guns and the feet, but played so quietly, like it's not there and it's in your face. It's so subtle. To then also going to like full on riot scenes, which we were able to shoot outside, which was really exciting because we've got surfaces outside, and because we're of our location, we can do both. So got to use that. And with all of the stuff of them being in the car, we've also got a van. So we set the van up outside, we got the screens outside, and we did full Foley for all the scenes inside the van. So that was really fun as like most recent one. And then I guess as I've just jumped over all the field recording equipment, my first field recording job, I'd say, which was for Forza 4, getting to go out to Costa Rica for 2 weeks in the middle of a pandemic, which was actually very, very good for field recording, obviously, because there was no one about. So we were just traipsing through the middle of the jungle with all of our equipment and capturing all the different sounds and locations that we needed to. And that's something that I've only started doing in the last 4 years, and isn't, related to Foley, but it's still related to sound, and that you are able to be semi-creative about as well. You're thinking in a completely different way, but you're thinking like, okay, so it's going to be here in the game. What do we need? What do you want to hear? Therefore, what tree do I need to go and find? Do we want that lake there? Like, and just, yeah, pulling all of that together in a different way.
That is awesome. Yeah, I can really say like the pandemic was amazing for field recording. I have a recording from the German Autobahn without cars on it. So it's a very boring recording. It's just wind noise. But for me, I know it's like on this busy Autobahn bridge, I'm standing there, no cars left and right for kilometers. And yeah, that was made a lot of nice nature recordings during that time. Yeah, so I'm going to go to the questions from the audience now, and we just go through them, and when we run out, I just have some more, so we will have some more to talk. So the first one is from Alexis Tahiri. How well do you try to familiarize yourself with the entire work before getting started with Foley, or is it more of a scene-by-scene process? Maybe we start again with you, Joanna, and we go through the line.
Yeah, no, it's pretty wild because back when I mostly was working in the cinema, obviously we'd try to watch the entire film at least once before we started Foleying it. Also, all three of us are part of a cohort or a generation of Foley talent where we had to wear a lot of different hats, especially now that budgets keep getting smaller and smaller and the time to train gets also increasingly small. We try to take every opportunity to familiarize yourself with the work before you actually record anything. So I was really lucky coming up because I got to cue pretty much every project that was coming through Alchemy. And that gave me the extra time I needed to really break down the sync of a character's gait or learn story moments. Whereas in video games, because these are very, very complex products that are often being worked on all the way until, in some cases after launch, it's really important to familiarize yourself with as much story material as you can. So luckily, because we're internal, we're able to access screenplays and we're able to read beat sheets and look at concept art. And so I've even had times where we have to Foley a character and the animation isn't done yet. So we have to just rely on still concept art and communicating with our sound designers to kind of give us some inspiration for how this thing moves. Right. And so for me, that's kind of how we familiarize ourselves with the work. We take whatever we can get. And as long as it's story oriented or you have the people you can ask the right questions to, never be afraid to ask those questions, Also, because we're so early in the process, there are often times where music isn't set. And music is a huge part of what sets the vibe in a project. I remember I was talking to Marco Costanzo, who shoots Foley at C5 in Jersey. He was working on Silence of the Lambs. And I asked him that whole film has a totally different vibe without music. And he explained to me that seeing it later in the mix and hearing the music actually finish made him actually question some of his Foley choices. But obviously it worked out in the end and the movie's a huge success. But that's a big part of onboarding.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Anything to add? Feel free.
So it's always very different depending on the project and the budget, like Joanna said. So when you're on feature films, we get to watch it entirety before starting. And then you can make sure, okay, we need to get these extra props, or, oh, we need to remember that actually that floorboard does need to creak because later on they lift it up and that's the trap door. Whereas if you don't watch it, you don't know and you have to go back and do that stuff. It's a lot harder on TV because the time is so much shorter. Like if you've got a day to do half an hour of TV, you have to sort of watch it whilst you're doing the moves or something for it. You can't sit and watch it and take notes and enjoy it. And then games, much again, like Joanna was saying, it depends on where they are in their timeline as to how much information we can get at the time. So sometimes, yeah, it's a grayscale character moving about and here's some rough drawings, or it is beautifully, completely animated and even down to the last strand of hair. Like, yeah, it really depends.
Nothing to add. Everything
Yeah.
is said to the topic.
Okay, then you can get the next question, Bastian, and it's from Danton Cordell. It's own studio, freelance versus Foley production studio, team of Foley artists. What has been your experiences, advice for starting out, for instance, straight out of film school?
Yeah, great question. I have the experience from working in an audio team in a post-production facility, which was great. We all had our own room and could work and meet up and go for lunch and have those chats in between, but being focused in your own room. Then I worked in a big game audio team where we started out in an open office, and I went crazy there because working on headphones, 5-10 people around me was not something I could enjoy. And then having my own Foley room for a couple of years, then being the only person in the entire studio that has that luxury, not even the managing director had that. I went back to normal for that time. And I also enjoyed the collaboration there with all the other departments, animation, as Joanna and Zoe already mentioned. And now working as a freelance, one-man show, trying to educate others and also team up with people that I educate, that they can do my editing later on, is a very great experience for me. And for people that start out, my whole coaching is basically about that you can start out by just doing it in your home studio, in your location that you have where you work as a sound person. If that's your bedroom or not, doesn't matter. And you use the tools that you have and you get yourself familiar with the craft. So starting walking footsteps, sitting on your couch watching Netflix, or setting up a microphone and record that, or building some modular surfaces with me and installing them in your edit suite in your corner, something like you have maybe, Ben, and do your sounds then there. That is how I would say you can start now. And the community is big and you can ask questions, whether it's in the Foley Artist group on Facebook or you reach out to people directly. And you can also follow me and get in touch with me. And yeah, that's how I recommend starting out.
Anyone else?
I would always try and find an established studio somewhere where you can grow and learn as part of a team, if possible. I know that's really difficult in obviously the current environment, both in games and films. Like it's a difficult place at the moment with redundancies and studios closing and stuff like that. But I think as it's clearly been made aware through not just this chat, all of the chats that have been on this week, everyone is willing to share. And especially for something like Foley, it is all about practice. It is muscle memory what we do. You have got to be able to pour a glass of water whilst looking at a screen and not looking at that cup on the table. Like your sync and muscle memory and movement has got to be top notch. So even if, like, my personal background, I don't have a recording background, I don't sit on Pro Tools, I don't edit. When I'm being a Foley artist, I just perform. So to learn starting out, I would walk down the street and not creepily follow people and learn their rhythm and their gaits and stuff like that. And I'd do the same at home, putting Netflix on. And my favorite one to practice to was The Wild, the one with Reese Witherspoon, where she's spending the entire film walking up different surfaces and stuff like that. So I'd try all of those things and get work experience in different studios. Like, I do think that when possible, being in a studio environment is like the best place to learn and play.
Joanna, do you also have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, you know, when Zoe's talking about shooting Foley for Civil War in actual locations, you know, sometimes people say they don't have the economic means to rent out a Foley stage, and as everyone here so patently is aware of, you know, yeah, this is a very expensive, you know, Foley stage. And Bastian, I'm sure you feel this in your construction process to build your own custom stage, that like not all of us have the ability to invest ourselves into that. So I always tell people, leverage what you have. If you have a mobile Pro Tools rig and you have a few microphones, that's great. You're already better off than like 60% of the people who are just getting into the field. But something that I realized that I had to teach people during the pandemic, especially when I was guest teaching NYU students, is you're able to bring yourself to places that are sonically similar enough to the projects they're working on. And for a lot of us in professional Foley, that's like extremely valuable thing. It's a luxury to be able to go out and record creaky wood footsteps in an actual cabin in the woods. So if you're a student who's coming up and you're working on a film that's set in an apartment, use an apartment. If you're cast the location the way Andy Malcolm does in Footsteps Canada, and I think you'll get results that will sound great and don't require like a $500,000 Foley stage to support you.
That's amazing. Yeah, to summarize, you can start anywhere, but just do it. Just do it. Yeah, and especially like you all said, like listening to stuff and trying to make it yourself to get a feel for what is easy and what is hard, and you will be surprised a lot of what is very hard to do, which doesn't sound that hard. And yeah, as Zoe also said, like the muscle memory is also a big part. It's so weird in the beginning when you just make a mess all over your floor with water. That happened to me, no. Yeah, another question from Jack Savage, which I'm really looking forward to hearing your answer, is how do you prefer to organize your props, especially smaller props? I see you laughing, Joanna, so please start.
Well, I don't. Just kidding. No, we always try to have a wide variety of boxes, bins, and what have you. You don't have to go and buy the exact same box for your entire Foley stage. If anything, you gain a lot more prop diversity by actually just having different containers for different things, right? So in terms of organization, there's always the difficulty of, do you organize by material? Like, is it metal, wood, plastic? Or do you organize by the type of sound it makes? Is it squeaky? Is it clean? Is it modern? Is it old? To that end, I was actually super inspired by the way Pinewood organized its Foley backstage. I saw a lot of cool videos with Zoe and Pete walking around and touring stuff, and something I actually have written down on a whiteboard is, what if we organized our Foley by, you know, by what a character does? So like I have one that says travel, which I think is directly inspired by travel, right?
Nice.
I have one called kitchen, weapon, communication, apparel. So instead of thinking purely by materials or literal things, which is how this stage was originally organized, it was all organized by sound designers thinking about game audio assets, I started realizing that when you organize it by lifestyle, you actually are able to get understanding of performance. So when we're doing a movie or a video game sequence that's full of kitchen sounds, I have my 4 bins full of everything I need for that in one section of the stage. So yeah, heavily inspired by all the work that you've done. So yeah, that's how I organize it.
That's a great idea. I'm gonna steal that for myself. Thank you. Going to Zoe then. That's awesome. Like going by type of sounds you make, maybe, right?
Yeah, so it's become a little bit more evolved since Pinewood. We have got a lot more props and now 3 studios to sort of manage and go, oh, okay, is it in that studio or that studio? Like, which prop store is it in as well? Like, so you have to be a little bit like, everybody knows the system. There has to be a system. Otherwise, you'll spend half your day looking for that one specific squeak you really want, and it's been put in travel. Like, so we've got like sections like travel and office supplies and things like that. But then when it comes to metal and wood, those are on their own, and you've got split up into their metal types: brass, new brass, old brass, modern metal, old iron, rusty iron. They've all got their own separate sections so that you know exactly where you need to go to. And especially for then smaller props, it's the sound that they make. So our smaller props are squeaks, creaks, tinkles, jingles, bells. Yeah. I although the Foley studio is an absolute mess, I do think the best way it's always good to have your props organized. Yeah.
Okay, Bastian,
Yeah.
what's your
I agree.
organization?
I think I'm not so far off from what you just said. I just reorganized all my props due to the new studio, and I have one cupboard with a couple of drawers, and there's all my metal stuff, and I have the metal also organized in terms of rattly and some tonal stuff and things like that, categories. And then I have a box only with buttons and those type of sounds. And then in the back here is all my wood props, and yeah, more or less not as sophisticated as Zoe, but I also don't have that amount of props in here.
But that's fine. Yeah, it's interesting going to organize by sound. I'm just gonna quickly answer the question as well, because I have a very, very small part Foley in my studio, because I do a lot of things as well. I also do sound design, editing, and so on. And for me, I'm constantly changing the props. So I'm getting rid of all props. I'm getting new props, because I only want to like create new stuff with new Foley props, and I don't have that much, unfortunately, that much like massive project with a lot of Foley. But I also like organize it by the sound they make, just like you said. But what would interest me is there somewhere a vocabulary online or maybe a book of all the sounds and what they mean? Because we have squanches, we have squelches, we have squeaks, we have what jingles, jangles, what do you have? So that's always something that interests me. Where do you get your wording for sounds? Is it something that just develops and then someone says, oh yeah, I also know that as well? Or do you sometimes hear words just like I do, and I'm going like, what kind of sound is that? And then I have to Google to hear the sound that it's making.
Oh, I think that was like, it's something that everybody, and it's why sound is so cool and difficult sometimes. It's so subjective. If I say squelch, that could mean a mud squelch, but it could also mean a gore squelch, which are two very different kinds of squelches. So I think as long as if you're working in a team, you're all on the same page as to what that specific jingle is, like, then you're okay. And then you can learn if a client comes to you and goes, oh, I want it to be jingly. You go, great. Have you got any reference, or like, what is that to you? Or give it a go and see what happens.
Yeah, on that note, we're also all English speaking here, right? And so a lot of the onomatopoeia, a lot of that stuff is relatable. We're all the romantic languages. When I collaborate with Japan or with folks in Taiwan or China, the range or even the concept of certain sounds is a completely different paradigm. And so when I was trying to describe sword sounds to my colleagues, I actually went and Googled like, what are some classic Japanese onomatopoeia sounds? And I was just like, whoa, how do I describe fashing to somebody who does not speak English in a way that lets me use that as musical expression? So as much as there's universality, we all collaborate internationally, and I'm sure that plays a huge role in it too.
Yeah.
And we have the universal category system now.
Yeah, of course we have that, at least. But it's I'm glad that I'm not the only one that's like, okay, how do I communicate this? But I think, Zoe, that what you said, that's something that I also do. Is like, oh yeah, but what do you mean? Do you have like a reference? I think especially for references, especially if you have like what is an impact and what is a screech, or sometimes you have those sounds that could be both or that have elements of both. And lots of the times I usually try to immediately start with a sound that either I have in my library, so we can talk about the real, like this, how does it sound? And then usually I get, oh yeah, just like that, or no, I mean something else, something like this. But yeah, probably we won't have ever some kind of vocabulary. It's just gonna be feeling. But that's all right. That's what I love for sound as well. Yeah, another question, and we only have like 5 minutes left, so I'm gonna choose one by random. Okay, yeah. What do you think is the main difference in Foley work between films and games? Go, Bastian.
The main difference is that you're not linear and you have to think very differently in terms of how you record and perform your sound. Because in linear, I can create focus. I have to do this. You know, 5 people walking in a house, and we shoot from different angles and jump from one room to the next. If I do every character full on, this will be a mess, and you have to edit for hours, and it's a mess on the mixing stage, and no one will like it. So we have to perform this already into your Foley. Whereas in a game, a cinematic, you cannot do this because the player can move around and the perspective changes. So that was a big difference for me. The first thing I had to learn was to not use my high cut. You know, I delivered all the sounds to Malmö, and they said, yeah, they're great, but we're lacking the high end. And I was saying, nah, it's all good. It has to be like that. No, it doesn't. That's a big difference.
That's good. Okay, I'm gonna jump to the next question so we get to some more. Joanna, for you, what is a prop or technique that you've seen at another studio that you loved so much you had to get one or try it yourself? From Chris Kirk.
Oh God, it's such a good question. I try to think of, I try to keep a very open mind. I think a lot of times, especially if you're like me or like an American Foley artist who's come up through, through, let's say, like the Hollywood scene or even the New York scene, you get trained a lot of the right way to do things and the wrong way to do things. Coming into video games, so refreshing because everyone here has a totally different take as to what cinematic sound design and cinematic Foley actually means. And so for me, the biggest thing that I was able to learn and to take from others was not to take, but to borrow, like truly, genuinely, was on God of War 3, all those years ago. Our team started collecting sword blanks and creating all these cool tones out of them. And so on one hand, it was hard for me to listen to it and be like, how are we going to use this? It's just like a ping. But for them, it was like this huge world of opportunities. And so when I started shooting Foley, that was like one of the first things that I like learned to like disengage and be like, okay, I can absorb this. I can try to give this my own concept. And so to that end, something that was like, oh, I have to have one of these for myself was we have this really strange looking axe blank that was left on the side of the road at a blacksmith's place. It was rejected. It was too weirdly shaped. It didn't make any sense, and so we were able to. I was able to inherit that prop from the sound designer who initially found it. And for me, that was like one of those big moments of like, whoa! I have this piece of video game here in my lap in the studio, and we just had to have it for Ragnarok when we kind of revitalized the series.
Nice, that's amazing. Okay, one last question for Zoe, and then we're going to close it. What is your process when you don't immediately know how to create a sound? From Andrew Scott.
Break it down. So if you don't know how, like, if it's a big sound, then break it down to its individual elements. Like, is it a train? What do you want to hear and need to hear on that train that would be Foley? Do you want the metal screeching? Do you need the carriage rattling? And then go, like, if you need to, go even smaller. Okay, what's the train made of? Is it metal or is it wood? Is it, you know, from the 1920s? So actually there's a catering truck on board. So you want to hear some crystal and silver forks and stuff like that. But if it's a small sound that isn't made up of lots of different things, it would be much more like just experimenting and playing. And when you've been doing it for such a long time, you've got this almost your own sound library in your head, and you can look at something and go, okay, why don't I try that? And instead of using it in that way like I usually do, let's flip it on its head and fill it with water and put it in the microwave and see what happens. Like it's a lot of experimenting even then, but you've got that because you've been playing and listening for so long, you've got that back knowledge as to sort of what things make those sounds. But even then you can still get surprised by things like I'm trying to think, what did we do? Like custard. We were playing with custard a lot recently and trying to blow bubbles with it and squelching in it and things. And then using different things within the custard and realizing it wasn't quite pouring. Oh, the best one I've just remembered, sorry, I'm also looking at the clock, was we were making magic sounds for a game, and we were trying to do like different fizzes and bubbles, and I had loads of different metal cups around me, from like huge goblets to tiny sort of almost thimbles, and we were just trying to pour different things into them, like sand and cat litter and different granules and sugar and coffee. And then I had my own drink, which was a can of Sprite next to me, and I just, when you can just hear something behind you, and I could hear it sort of ticking, like hang on. So I poured that slowly into one of the metal cups, and it all started going off, and then sprinkled cat litter into it really slowly, and it just started fizzing and bubbling in this way that's like, you suddenly feel like you're in science class in year 9, but I can actually just do this on the floor in the studio.
Yeah, we're all mad scientists. Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of experimenting. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, unfortunately our time has come to an end. I could talk for hours about this. So thank you very much to all you three for taking your time and answering all those questions. And yeah, if you guys out there and people out there want to hear more about sound stuff, of course, follow all those beautiful people here on the socials, and also check out the podcast Field and Foley. Bastian already was a guest, and we had like a full hour to talk about all things Foley and a lot of other questions. And I hope to get you two also on the podcast soon to talk more about specific Foley. That would be cool. Yeah, thank you so much, and have an amazing night.